Hi, my name is Liam. Welcome back to another episode of Learning KUDWA. We're very happy to have you here. And you may notice that we have a slight change in the co-host for the episode today. I'm joined by Lorenzo, Variant's co-founder, and I'm very happy to have him back in another episode. Happy to have you, Lorenzo.
It's great to be back, Liam.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you here. I'm sure our audience is too. So, who loves performance management? Lorenzo, what do you say? Do you love it?
Well, let me just say, so do you know anyone who excitedly goes to bed on Sunday night, being very fidgety in bed, rolling around, and gets nudged by their partner and say, "What's wrong?
Yeah.
What are you so excited about?" And all I say, "There's 3 more sleeps before my performance appraisal on Wednesday. I'm so excited, I can't wait."
I love this process. No, I'm joking. I'm being sarcastic. I don't really know any manager who enjoys this process, let alone anyone who looks forward to giving some feedback, especially when their performance is deemed as being worse or even poor.
Absolutely, eh? So why is it that so many managers hate performance management, let alone the people they manage? Why do they hate it so much?
Because it's a bureaucratic process. I'm sure you'd agree. It's very bureaucratic, and it's not always very effective in actually improving employee performance and getting those results. It can also be very time consuming and difficult or challenging to administer.
Yeah, it can also lead to conflict and resentment. It's difficult to accurately measure the performance of people, and then it's difficult to differentiate those employees who are not performing versus those who are.
Yeah, and it can create a culture of competition versus collaboration, which is really what we want. We want collaboration. It can lead to employees feeling like they are constantly being evaluated all of the time. And let's be honest, no one really enjoys being evaluated.
And then there's the big one. It can be really difficult to change the behavior of people using performance reviews.
Yeah, that's why there are a number of alternative ways to look at performance management that managers may find more effective, but we will get into that later, so just hang on. But just to be clear, we're not killing the idea of performance management, are we?
No. Performance management is quite vital for company performance because it helps, firstly, to identify and develop top performance. It identifies and addresses performance gaps. It helps you to motivate, if you've done properly, helps you to motivate and engage employees, improve communication and collaboration, and then it ensures that all employees are aligned to the company goal. It also improves organizational effectiveness. And what we're focusing on today is how many managers are implementing performance management in the incorrect way, and we want to solve that problem.
I've heard many managers say that performance management can be a complex, time-consuming process, and it can actually be quite difficult to get employees to buy into these performance management processes. Additionally, performance management can be quite subjective. It can be difficult to measure employee performance accurately.
Absolutely. I agree, and as we mentioned earlier, despite those challenges though, performance management is vital. We want to reiterate, performance management is important to your organization because it can help you engage and motivate your people, can help your organization achieve its goals, and without managing performance, you will have poor results.
Let's get into the bell curve. This may sound familiar. So I've heard the bell curve is a statistical tool used to measure performance. It can be useful for identifying high and low performing employees, but it can also lead to competition and dissatisfaction. However, the bell curve can be quite problematic. It leads to employees feeling like they are constantly being compared to each other. It also creates this culture that we mentioned earlier of competition and not collaboration. We want collaboration, don't we?
Absolutely. And despite all the good intentions and wonderful processes that have been created over 6 or 7 decades in organizations globally related to managing performance or improving performance, many managers listen to the wisdom of the said gurus out there. People who've written books, been on TV, been interviewed, and then they listen to this advice, but not correctly.
Yeah.
People and managers out there will make decisions based on tidbits or tweets or little things they read in articles and assume, wow, that's the golden gem for how to manage performance in my organization. But what's important to realize is that all of these gurus, as right as they may be at the time, can't include all of the facets, troubles, and challenges that they experience in developing or formulating their own performance management system. You can watch an interview, you can read a book. There is no way that all of the deep insights that a manager has gained will be revealed in those books. And so often, some of those lessons are being missed. And so for our audience's sake, we need to answer the question, who invented the bell curve and what was its original purpose?
Alright, now we're going to get into the technicalities. So in 1809, the bell curve is thought to be originally invented by a man named Carl Friedrich Gauss. Hope the Germans out there aren't going to kill me for saying this wrong, but he was a German mathematician who is often associated with the development and application especially of the bell curve, sometimes called the Gaussian curve, named after Mr. Gauss himself. Now, Gauss...
Well, actually it's Gaussian.
Gaussian. Gauss. You see, not even German and I'm getting grilled over here. Okay, so Gauss is generally regarded as one of the greatest mathematicians of all time for his contributions to number theory, geometry, probability theory, geodesy, planetary astronomy, the theory of functions. There's so much, eh? There's a lot here. This guy was a really, really clever guy.
He was big. I mean, he must have been, well, you said it, one of the greatest mathematicians of all time. And yet, nearly 100 years before him, earlier, a French mathematician named Abraham de Moivre.
Okay, the French are coming for you now. I got the Germans, you got the
You
French.
got the French, eh? He died before Gauss was even born. And he explained that same curve in trying to solve the problems of gambling. Now, what's interesting is he was interested in probability and chance. He wanted to know if you tossed a coin 1,000 times, how many times would it land on heads, and how many times or occurrences would there be if it landed on tails. And that led him to complicated maths, where he used complex numbers, trigonometry, and probability theory. Now, how did Carl, that was Abraham, eh? How did Carl use the bell curve in his research and development of the bell curve?
Carl used the statistical analysis of normal distribution of numbers to determine the accuracy of astronomical data. As an example, let's say 10 astronomers took a measurement of the speed of Saturn. They wouldn't all get the same result, would they?
Yeah.
However, if you took the average of that result, the average was more likely to be true than any individual measurement that there might be. So these differences tended to create what we know as the bell curve.
As wonderful as that is, this is where the problem arises. In management circles, in HR, in REMCOs, that's the remuneration committees, that make really important choices about people, their lives, their promotion, as well as the salary increases they may get. Because you see, the bell curve was designed to capture and record factual data and to gain insights from that data. Where the bell curve is a mathematical statistical tool used to gather data and record insights so that we can learn new things or discover new things, managers counterintuitively use the same curve to box people in, their potential, their capabilities into this bell curve.
Yeah, so how exactly is that a problem?
So let's look at a typical industry paradigm about how this curve is used in performance management circles. So as you can see in the curve, this is what many executives and REMCOs use to guide performance appraisal results that come off the pipeline, which most often is used to determine salary increases, performance bonuses, and sometimes how people even get promoted. But think about this. If this curve is true for all humans, then it implies in a group of 1,000 employees, 10% or 100 people should actually be fired or let go. And 15%, as you can see to the left, or 150 people are at risk of being fired in the near future if they don't pull up their socks quite quickly.
So Jack Welch, which is quite a famous name, the former CEO of General Electric, is famously known for implementing this controversial employee performance appraisal system during his time at the company. So Welch's system, often referred to as the rank and yank or forced ranking, had similarities to this bell curve approach that you just saw on your screen, in that it involved categorizing employees into different groups based on their performance. So here's an overview, more or less, of how it worked. So under Welch's system, managers were required to categorize their employees into 3 groups. So the top 20% were considered A players. and were rewarded with bonuses, promotions, and many other incentives. The middle 70% were labeled B players. So these players were expected to improve or even risk losing their jobs if they fell too low. And the bottom 10% were designated as C players. And these people were typically just let go.
Wow. Now he's had such an influence on the business society through all of the books and interviews that he shared. It really made him famous, and I think he liked it very much.
It did, yeah.
But here's the interesting things. Companies like Microsoft copied what he did, and they started a stack ranking system too. It involved ranking employees slightly with a different model, but into top talent, average talent, and poor performance. This system faced criticism for fostering internal competition, stifling innovation, and creating a tense work environment. You can imagine what it must be like to work in that company. Microsoft, though, cleverly or without any choice, had to abandon the system in 2013 in favor of a more collaborative and feedback-driven approach.
Yeah, here's another one, a famous one. Enron, before its famous or infamous collapse, was known for its very aggressive employee ranking system, also called the rank and yank approach. Employees were categorized into different performance groups, and those in the lowest category were often fired. Critics argue that this system contributed to the unethical behavior and financial misconduct that ultimately did lead to Enron's downfall.
And that's what's famously called the Enron scandal. But that's not all. There are more companies doing a copy and paste of Mr. Jack Welch's system. In fact, under the leadership of CEO Marissa Mayer, Yahoo, remember Yahoo?
I remember Yahoo.
Search engine that used to be famous before Google took over. Well, they implemented performance review systems. Well, in fact, what's interesting, Yahoo's still alive today.
They are, yeah.
Yeah, they are. And so they implemented this rank and yank system of performance reviews, using the bell curve as an example. The interesting thing, though, is that this approach has faced lots of criticism, both inside and outside the organization, leading to employee morale downfall. In fact, in late 2014 and early 2015, Yahoo fired 1,100 employees, ostensibly for performance reviews alone.
That is massive.
And in 2016, Yahoo faced scrutiny and legal questions regarding its forced ranking system in the past. And guess what? They too have had to let the system go.
Yeah, these are big recent companies. Here's another surprising one. At one point, Amazon was reported to have also had a performance appraisal system that included a forced ranking element, which some employees naturally found quite stressful. The company later shifted its approach to focus more on regular feedback and development. Does that sound familiar? Many managers and leaders take this copy and paste approach, so to speak, popularized by many famous managers with big personalities, big egos, very charismatic, without truly understanding their approach and what made it successful for them.
And we're not saying it didn't work for Jack Welch in GE, because it appears to have done. He's really got good results. But I think we don't have the big picture or the entire whole picture. But just before we move further, Liam, in summary, what would you say is wrong? Or let's say, rather, what is the purpose of the bell curve based on its originators and inventors?
The bell curve is about results. It's a statistical analysis and is an outcome.
So it's about looking at the facts of information, the truth of data out there, and then putting it into a curve and drawing out the results. And I think we're going to explain that a little bit more to our viewers in a while.
Yeah, so based on what we've discussed so far, what is the right way to think about performance management?
Yeah, and I think this is where the challenge comes into the minds of most managers, what you are struggling with out there, and we're going to try to help solve that problem. You see, we know that all people do not perform at the same level.
Yeah.
That is true. People are different. They have different personalities, they have different capabilities, they even have different potential. No two human beings are the same. Have you ever heard that saying? Don't judge the performance and the ability of a fish by how well it climbs a tree.
I have, yeah.
I think you by the same token you can say, don't judge a leopard by how well it can swim in a crocodile-infested river.
Oh, that's a brilliant explanation. And we're going to have to trademark that illustration, by the way. I think the first time I've heard that. So,
well, now I don't think we own it. I stole it from someone.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, we can't trademark it. You can take it. It's fine. So, coming back to bell curves. They are a statistical representation of the facts of a matter, as we mentioned earlier, and the current situation. The big mistake to believe is that the curve is decided up front, and then people should be made to fit into the box or the mold of the curve, so to speak.
So Ian, based on that conclusion, are we saying that the bell curve is not useful as a measure in human sciences?
Not necessarily. So let's try and illustrate this. There are some situations where measuring a human attribute, the bell curve might actually be very useful, and it can give us some amazing insights. So let's take the heights of newborn males and compare that to the same group of males later on as adults. That is statistically speaking, so not the same people per se. So you can have a look at a graph on your screen there. So you can see some people can be short, some can be average, tall, in between, anywhere. The y-axis in this curve shows the likelihood of seeing people who are very short, very tall, or of average height. For example, it's relatively rare to see someone who is super short, so the bell-shaped curve is relatively low in this part of the graph. But it's quite common to see someone who is close to the average height, so the bell-shaped curve is very tall in this region. And it's relatively rare to see someone who is really tall, so these are like your NBA players. So again, the bell-shaped curve is relatively low in this region. Here are two normal distributions of the height of male humans when born and as adults. This is the distribution for the babies, and this is the distribution for the adults. The average baby height is 20 inches. The average adult height is 70 inches. Normal distributions are always centered on the average value. Just by looking at the graph, we can tell that there is a high probability that a newborn baby will be between 19 and 21 inches tall. In contrast, however, adults are between 60 and 80 inches tall. You may have noticed that the curve for babies is much taller in comparison to the curve for adults. And this is because there are many more possibilities for adult height than there is for baby or infant height.
Wow, that was a mouthful, Liam. I must say, an awesome explanation. So, what is the cure or the solution? Should we dump the bell curve, or is there an effective way that we can use it in performance management?
So, before we go into sharing our insights on the bell curve, let's focus on a few essential principles that inform any results like a bell curve that we might see. Really, we're going to be focusing on fairness in remuneration committees. So, the first principle is fairness and bias. The fairness of these systems really depends on how accurately and transparently employees are evaluated and ranked. If there's a bias, if there's favoritism, if there's a lack of transparency in this ranking process, it can lead to unfair outcomes and it will demotivate employees.
Can I just interrupt there? So we're talking about fairness and bias not just at the REMCO level, but across the entire organization of those doing evaluations.
Yeah, absolutely. Entire organization. So the second principle is about the impact on morale. Forced ranking and bell curve systems can negatively affect employee morale, especially for those who might fall into those lower categories that might need to be yanked, as we mentioned earlier. And this can result in decreased job satisfaction and potentially high turnover rates as well.
Absolutely. Incorrectly applying this ranking into or forcing people into the bell curve can also affect the difference between collaboration and competition.
Yeah.
Performance management systems tend to foster competition amongst employees, which can have a positive and negative consequence, no doubt. But while competition can drive some individuals to excel, it will and may hinder many to not collaborate, to not support, to perhaps even sabotage team players of whom they are jealous because of the progress that they are making. Maybe also because of the bias that they have, because a manager likes one person more than another.
Yeah, we all saw that at school, teachers' pet vibes. Yeah. So the fourth principle relates to short-term versus long-term focus. Ranking systems may encourage a short-term focus on meeting very specific, quick metrics, simply to avoid being ranked low. And this comes potentially at the expense of the long-term goals that your organization might have. It comes at the expense of innovation. It even comes at the expense of creativity.
And then the next one's one of my favorite, and it's because of the work that we do. It's the impact that poor performance management has on individual versus team performance. You see, in some cases, forced ranking can emphasize the individual's performance way above that of the team. And have you ever seen a team where some people are stars, superstars?
Yes, yeah.
The negative impact that ego can have on the rest of the team. We see that in sport, but we can see that in the office too. And at Variant, using our KUDWA approach, we have a paradigm that asserts the team is always more important than your most valuable player. A good and strong leader and coach knows how to manage an excellent player while continuing to support and improve the performance of everyone on the team. We really need everyone to create a high-performing organization. We're not just looking for great players. And here's something interesting to note. In performance evaluations, your people are even rating their colleagues. They know who are the good and bad performers. And when their evaluation does not tie up with your evaluation, well, you know what happens in the corridors. You know what happens to morale, attitude, commitment, or any self-sacrificing spirit that you require when your backs are against the wall and you really need everyone to pull together to perform.
Yeah, and the sixth one here, or sixth principle, is innovation and risk-taking. Some argue that these systems discourage risk-taking and innovation because employees may be hesitant to take on new challenges or projects that will now negatively impact their rankings.
Yeah, and then business outcomes is an impact that comes from doing this right or doing this wrong. The impact of business performance and productivity can vary from industry and organization, no doubt. Some companies, though, have reported short-term improvements in financial metrics by implementing such performance management systems using the forced ranking system, while others have faced huge backlash and negative consequences, as we've mentioned earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. And the eighth impact, or the eighth thing that impacts, is employee development. These systems may not prioritize employee development and growth, which can hinder long-term retention and development of a skilled workforce. Yes, many organizations have shifted away from a rigid ranking and forced distribution system in favor of more flexible and more employee-centric performance management approaches. And these newer approaches focus on things like continuous feedback, coaching, and development to encourage employee growth and engagement. So, now we're going to talk about how we can lift and shift that bell curve.
Wow, that's a nice idea. So pay attention. But Liam, granted it is true that people are different and they all operate at a different level of contribution or performance, are we not throwing out the baby with the bathwater? Well, no. Rather, what we're asking you is, as Liam's just introduced, to change your paradigm, to choose a lift and shift approach for the curve. You see, the curve is still valuable when used accurately, but it's most valuable when you change how you lead, when you adapt your systems and your processes, and most especially when you change your paradigm about people and performance. So what do we mean by lifting and shifting the curve? Well, let's look at an adjusted bell curve for a high performance organization. In fact, this illustrates the new paradigm that we'd like to influence all managers interested in performance management to gain. Now, as you look at the curve, we have the same curve, but the curve does not, as you say, rank and what's the word?
Rank and yank, yeah.
Rank and yank, I love that. It doesn't rank and yank people to make them fit a common distribution.
Yeah.
In fact, we are choosing the kind of distribution we have. Wouldn't you agree that if you wanted a high performance organization, the majority of your people, not just your top 10%, needs to perform really well?
Yeah.
And so when you look at the curve, notice that the majority of people have shifted to the right. But also, as illustrated earlier in your nice demonstration of the bell curve, the curve is taller or tighter and shifted to the right, which means we have many more people performing at an exceedingly good level. We still have a few people who blow the lights out, there's no doubt, but we have fewer or no people underperforming. Imagine working in an organization when no one is underperforming.
Yeah. So what's the cure? What's the solution? How do we gain this beautiful picture that we've just seen there?
In other words, how do we achieve this paradigm in reality?
Yeah.
Well, we have to use the KUDWA approach in measuring, evaluating, and managing performance.
So the bell curve assumes that all roles can be ranked in the same way, which is not always the case. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution or one-size-fits-all approach, and we've kind of alluded to this in episode 7, which we encourage you to watch. Different jobs and different roles have different requirements, and a single ranking system may not accurately capture an individual's contributions.
The bell curve also assumes that a small percentage of people will always underperform and that another small percentage of people will always overperform. But that's problematic. Don't you want a large portion of your population to be performing really well or even exceeding expectations? And so to force managers to unfairly label employees as poor performing to make them fit the bell curve really demoralizes the organization, even if they're doing a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have to train, and we have to, well, actually, not just train, we need to retrain many managers to develop discernment, the ability to make better and more accurate decisions about performance evaluations. However, this is very difficult when decisions are being made based on inaccurate information, biased opinions, and inconsistent timing of reviews.
Yeah, and talking about discernment, you need to improve your judgment, because that's really what discernment means, eh? First, you need to suspend your opinions based on assumptions and focus your judgment on facts, on evidence. And to be able to do that, you need data.
You need data.
You need data. You know, Edward Deming famously said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." Now, Deming was a prominent statistician, professor, author, lecturer, and consultant who made significant contributions to quality management. He influenced the world over when it comes to production, productivity, and performance. In fact, this quote rightly emphasizes the importance of relying on empirical evidence, on data-driven decision-making, rather than solely being guided by intuition, opinion, or even unsupported claims.
That data is essential, hey? So, dear manager, what is your data collection system? Do you have one? Is it reliable and accurate? What is your proof of performance or lack thereof? So, next, when employees are constantly focusing on meeting specific performance metrics so as to avoid being in that lower echelon or lower end of the curve, it can discourage risk-taking, it can discourage innovation as well. People may be less willing to try new things if they fear it's going to negatively impact their rankings on this curve. We need people to try new things. It's essential for growth. We need people to take risks.
Absolutely.
Calculated risks, granted. So if you are going to fail, fail fast.
That's an interesting statement, eh? But it means that failures must not be held against people, and people must not be judged as poor performers. In systems design, a fail-fast system is one where people have the confidence to try and experiment and then immediately report failures so that we can report the lessons learned, so we can make changes, so we can improve, so we can make adjustments. The opposite culture, though, is we've got to hide our faults, we've got to hide our failures, because if we report it, we'd be in trouble and we're probably on our way out carrying a box.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, let's just say, we're not advocating dismissing or letting go of people who are not right for your organization. So if you're going to fire or let someone go, which sometimes we have to do, rather than firing the person who tries hard, makes mistakes, fails fast, and learns, why not let go of the person who does not even try at all?
Yeah.
Or perhaps the person with a really sucky attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Eh? So don't wait for a formal performance appraisal to give someone feedback and coaching. That's too late. Feedback, positive and negative, must be shared frequently so that you avoid that proverbial, the straw that broke the camel's back scenario. No one wants that scenario. When you talk about someone's perceived performance to everyone else, we all know that manager, hey, who talks to everybody else about their performance. But they never actually tell that person themselves. Why is that? They don't tell them how they feel about their performance until it's too late, until that last straw is on the camel's back. then we end up in formal disciplinary hearings when the employee has to go into this hedgehog mode because their job is on the line, they feel threatened, they feel that they need to do everything within their capabilities to protect themselves, to protect their reputation. So what do you think, Lorenzo? Do you think you can actually ever positively help someone out of actual poor performance in such a scenario?
So in my knowledge, fear is never a positive motivator to get people to improve their attitude or performance.
In general, performance improvement comes from a place of mutual interest by both the manager and their direct report. There must be an opportunity to improve.
There must be an incentive to improve.
Yeah, and there must be a belief that you, the manager, sees their unleashed potential, so much so that they come to see it themselves.
Yeah, trust is built on partnerships.
And partners collaborate.
Partners help each other.
And partners celebrate together.
It is in a team of partners that we create a culture of winning, where everyone thrives to do their best.
Absolutely. And what a blockbuster episode. Certainly a mouthful. I'm tired of my own voice. I hope you guys aren't tired of hearing my voice, but please stay tuned to our channel, and we teach managers and leaders how to get the most out of their people using the Learning KUDWA approach. At this point, we want to say to all our badge facilitators out there who might be watching this, who are currently running on the badge platform, who are using the KUDWA method for leading, for directing, for executing goals and changing your team culture, you don't have to necessarily worry about all of the ideas mentioned in this video. All of this is designed by default into our badge platform. So if you're not already on there, if you are on there,
well, you're gonna have to get on it soon.
Yeah, get on it too. If you are on there, just run the plane. You'll see how things work out. So keep learning, keep failing fast, failing forward more importantly, and creating high performance teams. Thank you very much, Lorenzo, for joining me on this episode. It was an amazing one.
It's one of my favorite, I must say.
Yeah, it was a brilliant one. Thank you very much to all our viewers for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep watching our content so that you stay informed as a manager. All the best.